joining me at this talk at the Wash Neighborhood Hub. Today is the last day of the convention, and I hope you've had a good time at the convention as well as in the tropical island of Singapore. My name is Ambaree, and I am a member and the current president of the Rotary Club of Marina City, and I'm also one of the co-chairs of a task force called Plant Rich Diet Task Force that falls under Environmental Sustainability Rotary Action Group that you might have seen. We have a great booth over there, SRAG booth. I am one of the members of that RAG as well as a co-chair of one of the task forces that deals with how our dietary patterns and trends has an impact on the future and the current position of our planet. So here are some of the commonly produced foods that we consume on a daily basis, multiple times in a day sometimes. And if you really look at these foods, you will realize that the foods that we consume can be categorized as either animal-based foods or plant-based foods. So foods that source from an animal and foods that source from a plant. This is the major category of foods that we consume. Now, today I'm going to be referring to that one industry that has an impact, or rather that plays a central role and a major impact on the speed at which we are approaching a climate catastrophe. And that industry is the animal agriculture industry. If you see reports that have been, there are many reports available online, and if you read those reports that have come, you will know that this industry, the livestock industry, is the one that has an impact on the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are caused, that is present in our planet, including methane, deforestation, soil pollution, land degradation, world hunger, ocean dead zone, biodiversity loss, you name it, and that element of climate change is impacted not negligibly but massively by what we eat on a daily basis, and especially with the food that come from animals. Now, before I get into the wash-related facts about how our diet impacts wash, I'd like to tell you a figure which I'll be referring to multiple times as we move on. Right now, as per statistics, 80 billion land animals are farmed and killed every single year, and innumerable trillions of aquatic animals are killed on a yearly basis only for human consumption. The reason why we have so many animals on the planet right now is because of the insatiable demand for meat, dairy, eggs, and fish, as well as seafood. So that's the number that we are dealing with. This planet was never designed to sustain so many farm animals, whether it is cattle, chickens, or even aquatic animals like seafood, like sea animals that we consume. This is a graph that shows the rise of the consumption and production of animals from 1960s up until 2022. And it is worth noting that right now we have 8 billion of us on this planet, and very soon by 2050 we are going to have 10 billion. And really, to be able to meet the demand, the skyrocketing demand for animal products is something that this planet was never designed to be able to handle. So today's talk, it's a short talk, but I'm going to be focusing more on two aspects of water. The water footprint of the food that we consume, especially the foods that come from animals, as well as the water pollution that is caused due to this massive number that I just quoted, which is 80 billion land animals and innumerable trillions of aquatic animals. Although there are multiple reports that are available online from climate organizations that showcase the insane amount of water that gets used up to produce animal products. This is one report that I found that kind of encapsulates it, and it makes it easy for even a layman to really understand. So 1/3 of the total water footprint of agriculture is actually dedicated to the production of animal products. 1/3 of it. And this number is significant because we are at a time, we can actually see climate emergency very, very close to us now. We are not hundreds of years away from a climate catastrophe anymore. We are very close to it. So at this point of time, at this point of emergency and urgency, this number makes a lot of difference. This might fascinate you that the water footprint of 1 calorie of beef is 20 times larger than 1 calorie that comes out of a grain, which is basically a plant-based, which is basically something that comes from plants. Also, the water footprint of 1 gram of protein sourced from cow's milk or eggs or chicken is 1.5 times larger than a plant-based protein source, like for example, pulses. The reason why such a massive difference, there is such a big difference between how much water is required to grow an animal and how much water is required to grow plants, is because animals are fundamentally inefficient processors. So there is something called feed conversion efficiency, wherein something is efficient when your input is smaller and your output is larger. But the minute you have an animal, you have to know that for us to be able to consume something that the animal produces, whether it's the flesh or the body secretions, whatever it may be, that animal needs to be at a certain age and weight. For an animal to grow to that age and weight, we need to feed that animal. And for us to be able to feed that animal, we need to grow feed crops. And when we are talking about 80 billion of them, we are talking about something that, again, as I said in the beginning, our planet was never designed to have. If you look at this diagram here, this is about energy, but also true for water, so any kind of resource. It takes a lot more calories to produce 1 food calorie that comes from a chicken. So it's only 11% converted, whereas for beef, it's even more. Now here is the difference between plant-derived foods and animal-derived foods. So when you grow plants, when you grow crops that human beings can consume, you just directly grow them and we consume them, and they're ready to be consumed. Of course we need land, we need fossil fuels, we need water for them, but we can feed many, many, many people. However, the minute you drop animals in this whole equation, what we are doing is that we are having to grow thousands and thousands kilograms of feed crop that are being fed to these billions of animals that were never supposed to be on this planet. And then, unfortunately, the output that we get is only fed to a handful of people. So the input is way larger. The mismatch is something that cannot be ignored, especially at this point of time when climate change is not a climate change anymore, it's pretty much a climate emergency. So this is a chart that shows the water footprint of different types of foods. If you see, the upper half of this chart consists of foods that come from animals, whereas the ones which are lower are the ones that come from plants. And the main reason is the feed conversion efficiency that I just talked to you about. To grow beef or lamb or pork, actually anything that comes from an animal is way more inefficient resource-wise as opposed to something that comes from plants. For example, it takes 47 times more water to produce 1 kg of beef as compared to 1 kg of vegetables. And to grow animal feed that is required to grow these 80 billion animals and aquatic animals, thousands of tons of freshwater withdrawals are required. So that was about the water footprint. And now I'm coming to the next part of my talk, which is water pollution or water resource degradation. For that, you have to understand what a CAFO means. A CAFO means concentrated animal feeding operation. As I said, 80 billion land animals were never supposed to be on this planet. So how are these animals grown? They are basically cramped up in these facilities under unnatural environments, and they are fed unnatural food. From the time they are born up until the time they are ready for human consumption, they live in something called CAFOs. So at these CAFOs, they are fed, but along with feeding comes waste that they produce, urine, manure, and also the water that becomes dirty after washing goes on, or washing operations go on in these facilities. So CAFOs are industrialized sized animal operations where thousands of animals are kept together so that they can be brought to an age and weight where they are ideal for human consumption. So typically, CAFOs are, if you see these sheltered places, these are the CAFOs where the animals are crammed up. When these animals are here, they eat here and they produce waste here. And CAFOs are generally accompanied with something called an open air lagoon. So all the waste water and all the waste solid and semi-solid waste, they are dumped untreated into this open air lagoon. And what happens is that during storms, which is very frequent, there is something unavoidable runoffs of these contaminated waters into what you see there, our freshwater resource. Okay, so these runoffs are pretty much unavoidable, and they become a part of our freshwater resources, something that we can have no control over. I'd like to share some facts or some figures about how much waste is really produced in a typical CAFO and what really happens to this waste. So animals raised for food produce approximately 130 times more waste than the whole human population. So 130 times more waste is produced by all the human beings produced, and that waste is going somewhere. And most of this waste goes untreated and becomes a part of our waterways very, very easily. As an example, on an average, to flush out and to clean a dairy facility, you need about 150 gallons of water every single day. That much of water is required just to clean the facility. And then the dirty water, the contaminated water becomes a part of the open air lagoon that I just showed. Once this water is polluted with animal waste, it is so polluted with, so what are the ingredients of this polluted water? So we have antibiotics, because antibiotics are indiscriminately used in the animal agriculture industry. Then we have hormones, which are also pumped into these animals as and when it is required. These hormones become a part of that water. Bacteria and pathogens, this is like a playground and a breeding ground for pathogens and bacteria, which become a part of our freshwater resources, which many times, even after being purified, actually pass through and become a part of fish, which we eventually eat. And it has been, medical research has shown how these hormones, these excessive hormones that are present in fish or in water that we consume, are directly linked to having nervous as well as maternity issues that to the people who drink that kind of water or consume that kind of water on a daily basis. So synthetic hormones, nitrogen-based fertilizers, I forgot about the fertilizers. Fertilizers and antibiotics become a part of the waste, which becomes a part of our water resources, and that is a complete showdown of public health risk. So this is another snapshot that I found that I wanted to share with everybody about how hormones go undetected many times, and they become a part of the seafood or the fish that we consume, which eventually become a part of our bodies and has many negative impacts on our health and of course the environment and more importantly the communities which live around these scaffolds. And most of these communities in most of the countries belong to the rural and belong to the poor communities, to the poor strata of the society, which makes it very easy for them to fall prey to these diseases, waterborne diseases. The impacts of this contaminated water being a part, I'll just check up the time. So the impact of this polluted water or contaminated water and the mixing of this contaminated water with freshwater resources gives rise to multiple issues. One of them, as I said, many of them, as I mentioned. The things that I listed here are, of course, algal bloom. Algal bloom is a condition that comes about when contaminated water with nitrogen, with the phosphorus and other nutrients become a part of water resources, and then that deoxygenates the water, which kind of kills all life, whether it's animals or plants. That those parts almost become like a desert inside a water body. There is no animal that is alive, there is no plant that is alive, and that causes an algal bloom. And many a times these algal blooms have of course have an impact on the marine life decimation, but they also get consumed by people living around the water bodies. Eutrophication, acidification, marine life decimation, these are some of the other impacts of the CAFOs that I mentioned in the beginning of my talk. There was a report a couple of, I think this was about a year ago, about how manure that gets collected from CAFOs are becoming an overloaded issue from factory farms that is becoming a disaster for many waterways across the country of the USA. Now, I'm coming towards the end of my talk, and because we are people of action, we are Rotarians, we want to know what can we do? Is it in our control? Okay? Because if it is in our control, then we want to give it 100%. If it is not in our control, that's not in our control. But fortunately, it is in our control. As I mentioned, that what we eat on a daily basis has an impact on all the dimensions of climate change, all of them, starting with plastic to land footprint, to water footprint, greenhouse gas emissions, ecosystem destruction, ocean dead zones or species loss. All of them are impacted by how much of animal products we eat on a daily basis, on a meal basis. So what is exactly our solution? Our solution is to focus more on foods that come from plants and depend less on foods that come from an animal. So when I say less, it can be as less as you are comfortable with, but it has to be less than what it is, because the skyrocketing demand for meat, dairy, eggs and fish for 8 billion people is something that our planet was never supposed to do. So bringing that demand down is the solution. If you bring that demand down, then you become a part of the solution. However, if you remain in the same level as your consumption as it has been previously, then you are not being a part of the solution, unfortunately. Or if it is going up, then you're actually becoming part of the problem. So just be conscious of how much meat, dairy, eggs and fish you eat, and as much as you want to invest your time on other aspects of the environment and other aspects of WASH, please know that on a daily basis, what you put on your plate has a massive impact on the waterways around you, and that has a massive impact on the health conditions of you and the communities living around CAFOs. So with that, I come to the end of my talk, and I am happy to take questions. So I have like about 2 minutes before Ian just shoos me off. Is there any question? Anybody has any question? Please ask me a question.
Can provide an addendum. I'm Scott Nelson from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm with Ambaree as a co-chair of the Plant-Rich Diet Task Force. I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is in the USA, and we're right in the midst of the Great Lakes. And so there's a video documentary that you might be interested on this topic, and it's called The Lake Erie Situation. In 2014, the water system for the city of Toledo was shut down because of harmful algal blooms. And so the Rotary Club of Toledo stood up a Lake Erie conference that they were going to hold every year until the problem was solved. The solution that the city came up with was to change their water treatment program rather than deal with the source. The source is agriculture and these CAFOs. So wherever you have harmful algal blooms anywhere on the planet, it's likely due to the agricultural impact. The solution is to change those agricultural practices.
And trends, the dietary trends that are coming about because of the high demand for certain foods, especially the ones that come from animals. Any other questions before I wrap up? My time checker is here. All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for your attention. I hope you have a great time here in Singapore. And as I said, I'm a member of Rotary Club of Marina City. If you have anything to ask me, I'm happy to answer about Singapore. About Singapore. Yeah, thank you.